Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Chip Fridrich, former Commodore pitcher who will talk some Vanderbilt baseball. Our podcast today presented by Wellspire, Nashville's Learning Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. Thanks also to our co-sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. Our news today presented by Sutherland and Belk, an SEC sports-loving injury firm in Nashville. These are folks who shoot you straight on your rights and options when you've been injured in an accident. Call them 615-846-6200 to get your questions answered. You can visit them online at sbinjurylaw.com. Well, Jerry Stackhouse, of course, named Vanderbilt's men's basketball coach earlier in the week. Just to update you, no assistants have been named of yet. We will keep you posted on that at vandysports.com, which, by the way, go to our front page right now. We've got a free trial offer until August. We have never run a special like that. So check out the website. Lots of content there that you won't get on the podcast to see what you've been missing if you have not subscribed already. Chip Fridrich joins us now. He, of course, pitched at Vanderbilt. He has done some color commentating around the baseball program. Chip, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. Hope you're doing well, and good to talk to you again as we reach the midpoint of the season after this weekend. Big weekend coming up for SEC teams across the South, and here in Nashville, of course, big series. So happy to talk to you about Commodore baseball today.
Well, I hope we have Commodore baseball to talk about next week, because is it just me, or does it seem like every single time they have a home series, the weather changes for the worse? I mean, and this has been going on like 10 or 12 years.
Sure. I mean, it's crazy. When we've been so wet here this spring, and I know that I saw the mosquitoes are going to have a field day. I heard it's going to be one of the worst with all the rain we've had. And it's just, I was at a kid's soccer game 2 weeks ago, and I was in a blanket and a lawn chair watching my daughter play in Goodlettsville. And then the next weekend it was, upper 70s the next weekend watching her play. So that's always been the case here lately, especially the last 10, 12 years. And it kind of, in a way, having the turf on the field, and especially the mound that they added that at Hawkins Field, I guess has paid dividends. And I understand, and you might be able to are we replacing that turf soon? I heard that a rumor that there was some drainage problems. Speaking of that, have you heard anything about that?
I have not. I have noticed standing water on the field occasionally. No, it has to really pour for that to happen. I think you have to replace that stuff every, 7 or 8 years anyway?
Right.
So what did they put that in? Was it
I heard.
Was it 13, 14 when they put that in?
That was right around then, yeah. So we were getting close to the life, if you're saying 7 or 8 years. But I did hear something in the past week or two that there's an issue with the drainage, and they're going to have to pull it up, which would, maybe it's in time with the wear. I do know around home plate, there's, they're having to replace some strips. The batter's box, there's a strip over at first base where the runners kind of get their leads. And then, of course, the pitching mound, I think they trade that out every year as far as where the pitchers, dig in. So that might be something to find out. But, yeah, I have heard it's something with the drainage that's not working as well as they would like for it to. That's a big-ticket item. Those things, the turf doesn't come cheap when you got to do the whole thing.
Well, it'll get tested this weekend, it sounds like. But let's back up a little bit. I know the Georgia series wasn't one everybody wanted, but I think they're still in really good shape for, you name the goal, SEC regular season title, regional host, national seed. Yes, if they had gone to Georgia and won 2 of 3, then they'd be in outstanding shape. But I still think if you look at the remaining schedule, I think I like their chances to win the league maybe as much as anyone's.
Yeah, the Georgia series was a weird one, Chris, and I often talk winning 3-2. They played from behind most of the night. There wasn't a game in which either team was some really good pitching and back and forth. Georgia took the lead, and until the ninth, the Commodores come back. But when you look back on that weekend and then you piece together what happened against Western Kentucky 2-3 days prior when they came from behind and then they go in and win that game in extra innings. with the Blade hit. But then when you look at the 4 games of the week in totality, when you look at those 4 games, it doesn't make you feel as good as far as the whole. I'm sure Tim Corbin and his staff were scratching their heads on the way home because, yes, they won two of the 4 games, but not as they had been playing in a positive manner as they had been playing the last couple of weeks. I mean, again, they come from behind. They win the game in Western. They win coming from behind on Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday are just not up to their standards of what they've been playing. Now, pitching had a lot to do with it, but on Sunday being a disaster. I mean, you're not going to beat Swanee if you get 1 hit. I mean, you're not going to. No offense to people at Swanee, I love the place, but you're not. If you don't hit the baseball and you get 1 hit, there's not much you can do. So, I think it was a weekend that. Some guys' averages fell. We had some guys that look at the stats today in the 400s, and now they're in the upper 300s, and including Austin Martin, who was red hot. So, but when you're not getting the timely hitting like you have before, you're not going to beat anybody. And I think they just ran against a very good Georgia team, very good team this year that was sitting there waiting on them. And that's just life in the SEC. You're going to run into some buzzsaws that you're going to have to deal with throughout the year. And that's just what this team's got to find out. And, of course, they go out and blow out a not very good MTSU team midweek this week. And that was good to see. Some guys getting some hits that hadn't been getting some action, that hadn't gotten some action all year long. And we hope to see that carry on to the weekend. But that's going to happen in the life of the SEC. You're going to run in some teams that are sitting there waiting on you. They're already having good years in this conference. And there's just, as I was telling a friend the other day, there is more than ever, there is just not a weekend to breathe in this conference. You do not have a weekend off. You don't have any time for comfort as far as trying new players, getting some people in like we did this week against Middle. It is a constant just battle going back and forth for these teams, and it's the emotion of it. It is the ups and downs and the momentum. I mean, who would have thought that the Vanderbilt team on Friday night gets the win and coming from behind, and you're going to bed, you're feeling good, you're going back to the hotel as a player, and I'm kind of giving you the perspective of a guy who's played in the league and has played at Vanderbilt, and that's what I do on your podcast. But you're feeling good about yourself. You're feeling good about winning. You've won 2 in a row coming from behind. And then you're feeling lousy on Sunday, 24, 36 hours later with the result of what happened. And then you start thinking back, like I said earlier, man, we didn't have a very good week if you really look at it. So we'll hopefully see them bounce back. But, we got a team that's the defending runner-up in the College World Series coming in, so it just doesn't get any easier.
Well, several thoughts here. First of all, I'm not super concerned from a Vanderbilt perspective about last week. I think it was one of those perfect storms where they maybe weren't hitting as well, taking the Western game and then maybe going to Georgia. You had their biggest guys. I mean, heck, the top 5 guys didn't hit all weekend. Plus, you caught a Georgia pitching staff that's one of the best in the country, throwing really well. I think maybe if Arkansas's got a great pitching staff. Maybe if you have another weekend where they score 6, 7, 8 runs, if they go 3 games, you're concerned. But I still say I think this is the best offense Tim's had.
Oh, yeah. And you're going, I mean, guys hitting in the 400s, that's not going to be sustainable all year long. And Martin drops to 388 and Blade drops to 351. And, they did not get the timely hitting that they've been having. You got some home runs that they've been seemed like playing the long ball quite a bit, but it just wasn't the consecutive hits. Sunday doesn't even count when you talk consecutive hits because they only got 1. But you didn't have that timely hitting that they have been having, those big innings, and that just didn't seem to happen. But we'll see how it works out this weekend. But you're facing a Arkansas team that's got a great staff and one of the best pitchers in the country coming in here too. So we'll see how it balances out and see if they can get back on the track. This weekend is what I've always called kind of breakout weekend in the conference. Midpoint is at the end of this weekend with the 15th game being Sunday, and it's a separation weekend where you're going to see a lot of teams. Some teams are at the bottom of the barrel, but you're going to see some teams that break out that possibly haven't done so, might be kind of lagging in the standings, and then get a big weekend in weekend 5 and bust out of there. And you're going to see some teams possibly fall by the wayside. But this is I'm not trying to put too much emphasis on this weekend, but it's a big one for both teams, both Arkansas and Vanderbilt.
Chip, I'm going to throw a stat at you in regards to the league, and I think the word incredible is overused, and I try not to use it a lot, but this is really incredible. I don't think I've ever seen this before. We are in weekend 5 of SEC play, quite literally every single one of the SEC's teams, which there are 14 of them, are in the top 47 of the RPI. I don't ever remember that happening.
Yeah, I don't either. That's an incredible stat. I'm glad you brought that to my attention. I knew that it was close, but and you look at the standings, the only team that's really suffering big time in this league is Kentucky at 2-10. South Carolina is not that far behind, and at 3-9 in the conference. They have a 20-13 record overall, but and the West is definitely outperforming the East, and that's where a lot of those numbers are coming from. But that is a pretty incredible stat when you look at it, and bodes well for the conference that this is happening. Again, as I mentioned, the West is definitely from top to bottom on their side of the class over the East. You got some teams struggling. Florida's not having their, and that's, you're saying that without Florida being 4-8 and 22-13 and being swept twice. That's unheard of. If you would have told me a Florida team would be at that point. What is their RPI? What is Florida's? Because I'm sure it's pretty high as far as they've still got a good schedule. But what do you see as far as their RPI?
I use Warren Nolan, and Florida right now is 29, which now they've got to get the 4-8 record in SEC improved, but right now, RPI-wise, that's a tournament team. And by the way, beat Florida State. Here's another incredible stat. Florida just beat Florida State for the 11th straight time.
And that just drives them crazy. I mean, I'm sure that drives Florida State crazy that a year when they, would think that Florida's a little down, but yeah. But Florida's a team to watch. They got some young kids. They're starting a lot of young position players. We saw that when they came here, and they'll make a push because the talent is there. But the standings are a little upside down on the eastern side, what they have been, with the exception of Vanderbilt. You got Georgia, Vanderbilt, Missouri at the top, along with Tennessee, and then Florida, South Carolina, Kentucky at the bottom. It's kind of almost a upside down of what it's been, with the exception of Vanderbilt, in the last, I'd say, 5 or 6 years.
Well, and let's be fair, too. The RPI sort of builds off itself. You can be a bad team, but if you play a brutal schedule, in the RPI, it doesn't matter if you get beat 20-0 or 1-0. It counts the same as a win or a loss. So I don't think that the league literally has 14 top 50 teams in terms of quality, but I'm looking at Boyd's World, which is probably the best computer ranking, maybe the only one that I know of right now that's reputable at all, that follows college baseball, and you still got Alabama 51, you've got South Carolina 66, Kentucky 68. Those are the 3 worst teams in the league, and even in their ranking systems, they're not too far off. So, and furthermore on the RPI, let's circle back to that, and that's the one that matters, Chip, because that's the one that the NCAA selection committee uses to seed. You've got all but 3 of those teams in that top 29, so it's not just that they're in the top 50. It's according to the RPI, you've got 11 top 30 teams. And that's one thing that, like, even if you lose a series, now eventually the NCAA is not going to let all 14 teams in. We know that. So conference record's going to matter. Somebody's going to get weeded out. But even right now, if you lose games in conference, it doesn't really hurt you that much.
Sure. You're right. And, as you mentioned, Florida and South Carolina, Florida at 4-8 and South Carolina at 3-9, but they're going to have to do some damage. I mean, I don't see, it's an out for the committee if, and this from basketball too, it's an easy out for the committee if a team has such an upside down conference record to say, well, they didn't play within their, we don't care. We're going to kind of ignore the fact that the RPI from top to bottom of the SEC is so high. If you don't win in your conference, I mean, we can't take a team that's 7 or 8 games under 500 when, mid-May rolls around. So Florida's got some work to do, as does South Carolina, and see if they can work it out. But that's an incredible stat. I didn't realize it was that number. I knew it was close, but I didn't realize it was that number of teams that were in the top 50.
Yeah, I think the teams that are going to be left out, I think South Carolina and Kentucky will end up being that way. I'm just not sure that they're good enough. Alabama, I'm not sure Alabama's talented enough, but it's playing really well under, I think, a new coaching staff. So that's one to watch. Of course, Bama plays in the West. I don't know how many specifically they have played in the West. That's a tougher division. So the weeding out process, I suspect those are the teams that are going to see it. But even Missouri, a team that's usually in that bottom 2 or 3 in the league. Right now, 5-6-1 and 27 in the RPI and leading the league in ERA 2.02 in conference games in terms of earned run average. They have given up 14 unearned runs, so that's a little bit skewed. But anyway, Chip, I want to talk about the outfield situation for just a moment. Pat DeMarco has not played since the 3rd game of the Texas A&M series. I keep hearing he's close, but I've been hearing that for maybe a week or 10 days now. We've not seen him yet. Cooper Davis gets a rest. Isaiah Thomas hits really well in his place. What's your thought on how this outfield settles in the near future?
Man, and this is something we talked about in the last podcast. It all revolves around DeMarco, because I don't think they're going to really know until he gets back and he gets into a situation where he's playing regularly. I mean, as you mentioned, he's played in 20 games this year. He's missed 13. So until he gets back, I think they're just going to try some different scenarios out there. I mean, there's a bunch of different things you can play with the DH in that scenario. You can move some people around. I thought it was interesting that, Thomas got the start midweek, but that's a Tim Corbin thing. He's going to try some different things midweek. And, the thing that is not in years past, and a lot of teams are doing that, looking at some SEC teams' schedule. A lot of these clubs have, instead of playing 2 games midweek, they're playing 1, and they're stacking the schedule earlier on, where they're playing 3-game series against teams early in February and before conference play. So you don't really have a lot of times when you can experiment out there. I mean, the last couple of weeks, Vanderbilt's had 1 game a week. Years past, that's been 2 games. It's usually a Tuesday, Wednesday scenario. Now, there's a couple times where that happened earlier, but the last couple of weeks it hasn't. So trying to tinker with that and see who's going to get the nod out in that outfield, because you want to get, as we mentioned, your game 15 at the end of this week, you want to get your lineup settled. And you got some, guys who are performing when they get in. I mean, Chris, it's not like you're getting guys who are going out there and getting their chance when they do, and they're not performing, which makes it really, really hard for the staff. It's a good problem to have. I think we talked about that last week. But I don't think they really will know until they get the full health of DeMarco and they get out there and they can say, okay, he's ready to go. He's ready to give us so many at-bats to see where he is. But they're not getting what a lot of times you plug some guys in and they don't perform, and it's because maybe they hadn't had the experience and hadn't had the at-bats. But it's a good problem to have. I think we highlighted that last week. But, man, if you were to just throw them all in a hat and shake them up and pick them out right now, that's kind of where you are. But you do want some consistency. You need the depth now. You need some depth when you go to the tournament. But where they go is anybody's guess as far as, you might be seeing some where they're playing matchups against certain pitchers. You're heavy left-handed batting. And my thought is if they catch somebody, a left-handed pitcher who's pretty dominant in this league, or when they get into a regional, and how that is going to, because there's left-handed pitchers obviously in the league, but that's not a concern. But if you get a really, really dominant lefty against this lefty heavy team as far as in the hitting side, all it takes is one bad game in a regional or super regional and somebody shuts you down. I'm wondering if more and more teams are going to be pitching left-handers on purpose and seeing how Mike Baxter's batters can handle that going forward.
Well, the blessing with injuries is always this. It gives you a chance to work in some other guys and see what you might have there without the pressure, because if a Pat DeMarco is not an option, you're really not going to get questioned on that as a coach. And we have said all year, this is a really deep lineup, and the parts affect each other. Like what they do at third may affect what happens at first with Julian Infante, or what happens in left in particular may affect Infante, because you have Steven Scott who can play first. Or Scott can also DH, and if you DH Scott, then that means you can't play Ty Duvall, and on and on and on, and all these combinations. And so like at the first of the year, Chip, we're figuring, okay, they got some combination of Davis, Blade, DeMarco, and Scott in the outfield. Well, now Isaiah Thomas rises up and hits a double and a home run against MTSU on Tuesday. Now, I don't know what to make of that yet. Middle staff is certainly nowhere near what you will see in SEC weekend pitching, but it's something to think about. You got Jason Gonzalez, who's hit really well all year. He can't find playing time with any consistency because Harrison Ray is sort of locked down second, which has relegated Austin Martin to third. Duvall is always in flux. He's been DHing a lot. He caught the other day, but I think it's going to be really interesting when you get all these guys back. Is Tim just going to go with the guys that he liked at the beginning of the year? Or is he going to say, okay, we got a tough lefty today, and maybe we play and Isaiah Thomas or whatever the case is, or, name any one of guys. I mean, all of a sudden, throw Dominic Keegan in there. I don't know, you've got, 13 or 14 quality hitters, which usually, even with some of their great teams, it's like, okay, we like these 7 guys, maybe these 8, and then, once you get down to 9 and pinch hitting, it's not pretty some years. I think of the 2007 team where Brad French played first but didn't hit much. I think this is going to be a really interesting development to see how Tim plays this if he gets everybody healthy.
I don't recall, Chris, a year in the past decade that had a team that was this talented hitting but had so much influx as far as position play. I don't. You might agree or disagree, but I think most years, a year ago, 2 years ago, now the results might not have been the same on behind, as far as hitting, being as potent, but I don't recall a year when, as you mentioned, you have Austin Martin, who's one of the best hitter on the team, but he's a guy. Is he really supposed to be the third baseman? Is that his comfortable position? You've got Harrison Ray, who earned the spot when he was out, and you have all this moving around, and I'm sure it's not something the coaching staff wants. But as you mentioned, it's a good problem to have. But I don't think, as someone who's coached the game and coached sports before, you want to have that lineup locked down pretty much after week 5 or 6, and this team doesn't. Now, as long as you're winning, that's okay. The thing that is about a Vanderbilt type school that is a nationally ranked school, and they're getting top recruiting classes. And I remember saying this last year in one of your podcasts about the pitching staff. Your chances are so limited once the season starts and you're playing 1 game midweek and you're playing 3 in the weekend. Your chances to get out there and perform and show that you can play are so limited that I feel like there's a pressure cooker, and it's not just at Vanderbilt, it's at other prominent programs, that you've got a couple chances to perform. And if you don't, you're not going to get the ball if you're a pitcher, and you're not going to get up to the dish if you're a hitter. And usually that works itself out. And then you'll see a pitcher who doesn't get the ball for a Corbin team, and he's pitched 4 innings all year, and the draft comes around and it rolls around and he gets drafted in the 6th round. And you're like, this guy didn't even pitch. Well, that's usually been a pitching thing at Vanderbilt. Now you're seeing some guys who are hitting the ball consistently, like you said, 12, 13 consistent hitters that are doing the job. And one of these guys, a couple of them are going to have to sit. And then you say, well, what do you do with it? Well, you can only play 9. And you got a DH. So 10 are going to be in the lineup. And I think if you're Tim and Baxter and Macias, the entire coaching staff, Scott Brown, Macias, you got to play the hot hitter. You got to play matchups, and you got to give opportunities to see how these guys perform under pressure. That's the only way you can do it. There's no other way. It's a good issue to have, but the coach would favor, the staff would favor to work itself out. But what the asterisk by that is that you've got a lot of guys who might not be playing where they need to be, but it's working out so far. You've won 20+ games, so we'll see how it works out. It's something I don't know if you recall. I don't recall an influx as far as where people should actually be playing in the last decade or so.
No, I've never seen anything like this. And by the way, to prove my point, I didn't even mention Walker Crisanti, who hit a home run in Athens. I don't think has landed yet. Justin Henry Malloy, they thought might be their top bat off the bench, and he got starts opening weekend. So they thought a lot of him. Here's what you've got. You got right now your 9, I guess, are Infante, Ray, Martin, Paul, Clark, Davis, Blade, Scott, and Duvall. And then in addition to that, you got Crisanti, Keegan, Gonzalez, Pat DeMarco, wherever he fits back in, Isaiah Thomas now maybe, and Justin Henry Malloy. That's 15 guys right there. And by the way, that doesn't even include Keambo Fentress, who maybe isn't much of a bat, but is their defensive replacement a lot of times in center. Yeah, I've never seen anything like it. But let me ask you one more thing before I go to the mailbag and then let you out of here in a minute, Chip. I guess the thing that I'm wondering right now, and this is where it gets so complicated, you think, well, the obvious spots where things might work themselves out is if Infante doesn't hit. Well, he's hit 4 bombs in 9 games now, and he's striking out a lot, but he's hitting the ball hard, and the rate at which he's hitting the ball hard makes the strikeouts worth it. Well, the other one is Harrison Ray, who will make the spectacular play at second and make some plays maybe nobody else on the team will make with his athleticism, but has botched some routine plays lately. Well, Martin has struggled at third. I don't know if Jason Gonzalez is any better or worse than him at third. He does some great things at times, and he's really hit the ball. The minute I say, well, maybe it's time to replace Ray, well, he hit the ball better than anybody this weekend. But what do you do at this point? Do you maybe throw Martin back at second, give Gonzalez a chance because of the power in the bat? I mean, I don't have a lot of clear answers, but I'm just wondering, like, if you get all hands on deck, if you're Tim Corbin, how do you handle this?
Well, I think they really like Ray at second. I like Ray at second. I know he's had some opportunities of late that didn't work out for him, but he's dynamic. He's quick. I think they like his style of play and his range going to get the ball to his left and right. So until he falters a little more and the sample size is a little larger, I think you're going to still see him at second base. But, you had the opportunity with Martin, had his opportunity already. I'm not so sure they're ready to go there back with Martin at second base. Who knows? But I really do think, just reading between the lines here, they really do like Ray at second base, and I think the job's his unless he just fails tremendously here over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, and the thing that we've learned about Vanderbilt, they will always err on the side of defense under Tim Corbin.
Sure. I mean, he's almost. I mean, he made a play. I don't know if you saw it on the highlights, but I mean, he made a Tony Kemp-esque. It wasn't as good as Tony Kemp's catch in Georgia a couple years ago, but it was when Tony laid out. I don't know if you remember that catch. It was all over.
Oh, I was there for that. Yes, and I saw the one that Ray made this weekend too. I thought of that too. It did harken back to that catch because they were very similar.
Yeah, and Harrison Ray plays a deep second base, especially at home on that turf. He can go get balls. His range is exceptional. So we'll see how that works out. If the gut feel here, I just don't think they're ready to move Martin back to that second base spot. And again, you go through the lineup, like we mentioned, you say, well, God, we haven't even seen, you look through the lineup, you get to the 6th inning, and then you say, well, Gonzalez hadn't even played today. Or, you look at, you start adding these names, and because of their depth, they're lucky in the fact that when guys are out or they're not out of the lineup, they're not being missed. Now, they were missed on Sunday with only getting 1 hit and over the weekend as a whole, but we'll see how that works out. Again, usually it plays itself out and works itself out, and we'll see if it does this year.
By the way, one stat, I'm looking at the SEC's official stats before we go to get a mailbag question and get you out here. This is another one of those things that just pops off the page and says it's hard to believe. South Carolina is hitting 189 in SEC games, Chip.
Yeah, that is that's a unique situation there, and one to follow. They've got a facility there that's unbelievable. They've recruited really well over the last decade. They've got all that history of national titles and being in title games, and the natives are getting restless over there once again. It kind of all started about 3-4 years ago when they lost a regional at home to Maryland, and ever since then it just hasn't gotten itself right. And that is a baseball-rich area. They can recruit really well. They got second-to-none facilities, and the hitting below 200 as a team in SEC play is not going to get it done down there.
Yeah, and here's the other SEC stat that jumps out. Florida with a 7.41 ERA in league play, and that doesn't even include the 15 unearned runs the Gators have given up.
Right. I mean, you look at what they did. Their numbers were very similar against Ole Miss as far as total runs for and against that were here in the Vanderbilt series. That was they just got shellacked down in Oxford, and youth can be an excuse for many things, but I mean, I'm pretty sure the youth in that team is their position players, not their staff, and they've got some young arms, but not what was expected for the Gators this year thus far through 12 games.
Yeah, Florida gave up 40 runs to Ole Miss this weekend, which is another one of those things you thought you'd never see. Our mailbag brought to you by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Need home, auto, motorcycle renters, or landlord insurance? What about life insurance or commercial insurance? Josh is the guy you need to contact. Call him 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. I think you'll be pleased. Ann Arbor says, if Vanderbilt loses the series with Arkansas, what's your level of concern?
Well, I mean, as we talked about earlier, you're just bringing teams in here. You're going to another school that the national runner-up last year. It doesn't get any easier. I mean, it's Vanderbilt goes to Alabama. It goes at Alabama, Auburn at home, at South Carolina, Missouri at home, at Kentucky to finish off. Trying to say, is it doomsday or time to panic if something doesn't go this weekend the way it should? I don't think so. Because I think the schedule gets a little more favorable down the stretch when you look at it as far as home and aways, especially with South Carolina flailing a little bit, and you got Missouri here, and you're going at Kentucky. So the schedule as a whole, Chris, gets a little easier after this weekend. But I don't think it's time in this league with how this team has performed, what their RPI is going to be. I mean, they're going to be, unless everything just falls apart, they're going to be a regional host. So I don't think they just need to work some things out. Is what we've been talking about as far as the position playing, see if they can get rebound on the hitting wise from a bad weekend. It looks like they've done that, even though it was against a very bad middle team. That kind of upticks the confidence a little bit. So the psychological of going down to Athens, I think this team's pretty grounded, and losing 2 of 3, you can look on it one side, say, they lost 2 out of 3, big deal. The rebound, come back at Arkansas. And then you look at it from the negative approach. Well, they've gone on the road this year twice, and they've lost 2 out of 3. They lost to Texas A&M. They lost to Georgia, 2 very good teams. So as you go on the road in the future, how is that going to wear on them? Well, winning a series against Arkansas would be a big confidence boost as they head down this stretch of playing some teams that are not as talented as they are. So, no, it's not time to panic. I use that 15 game. I've always used that 15th game to kind of assess everybody after the midway point, and that's what they're going to do. And I'm sure the staff is I have 100% confidence they know what they're doing, but it is a time to take a deep breath and say, all right, where are we? Where we need to go? We need to make some changes as far as solidifying this lineup, getting some consistency. So this is not a do or die weekend. Arkansas, though, is coming in after winning 2 out of 3 at Auburn, so they're going to be on an uptick, feeling good about themselves. Anytime you win on the road and win a series on the road, you're going to feel good about yourself. But this is a very important series. I think it's important for the confidence and the psyche of Vanderbilt, and it's coming against a team that's coming in very confident. So how they match up. The weather's going to play up. Are they going to have to play 2 one day? Those are always funky, Chris. As you know, you end up thinking you're playing 3 consecutive nights, and then you have to play a doubleheader, and how that's going to work out with the weather, because you never can tell, and it kind of changes the schedule as far as pitching too. But I feel good about where this team is. You mentioned it earlier in the broadcast. I feel about where they are is in a good spot. But this is a big series. It's big playing against a team that's perennially good, has some good bats, very good pitching, and how they stack up against this team. We'll see after Game 15 how it works out.
Yeah, and the flip side to that concern is if they win this weekend, they are in outstanding shape for just you name it, whether it's hosting a national seed or even in the conference chase. Hey, Chip, thank you for joining us today. I know you've got a thriving real estate business. Tell people about that.
Sure, Chris. We have over 160 agents at our 2 offices, one in Brentwood and Maryland Farms area and one in Green Hills where I am. And some interesting results just came out. The average sales price of our homes in the year 2018 was $619,000. So that's one of the tops, if not the tops, in the Middle Tennessee area. And the interesting thing about it is these sales were located in 40 different zip codes, ranging from $80,000 on the low end from a home to up to the largest sale, and was the largest sale coming out of our office in the Davidson County, Middle Tennessee area of $7.2 million. So what am I trying to tell you? If you use one of our agents, call us anytime, look us up on the web and check our agents out. Give us a call. We're happy to direct you to the agent that suits your needs. But my point is we can handle your real estate needs in the below $100,000, or a condominium, or a piece of rental property that you're trying to buy, up to some of the largest houses that are on the market in the mid-state area. So we are very adapt to people's needs. We can take you through the mortgage process, the inspection process, getting pre-qualified. We definitely have contacts in that area to make the entire buying process or the entire selling process. If you're interested in selling, it's a good time to do so. The market is extremely hot and still a seller's market somewhat. Check us out on the web at frederickandclark.com. We're Vanderbilt people. We have Vanderbilt ownerships, alums from Vanderbilt, Whit Clark, Steve Frederick, myself, all Vanderbilt alums. We also will broaden ourselves to anyone in the SEC community. We don't discriminate. But we definitely have deep Vanderbilt ties to the community. We'd love to help your listeners with any of their real estate needs, again, on the buy side or the sell side. So check us out at frederickandclark.com or give us a call at the office at 615-327-4800.
Was Jerry Stackhouse the buyer on your $7 million home?
No, we'd love to sell Jerry a home. We sold some Vanderbilt coaches some houses down the road, and but no, that was not that Jerry hasn't bought yet. Put it that way. We'd love to help him out. He knows some people that know Jerry. We're trying to work some inroads, but hopefully he's going to buy a home here and be here for a long time.
Yeah, I think Jerry can afford that now based on the contract figures that were reported.
That's what I hear as well.
Chip, thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next week.
All right, Chris. Have a great weekend.
You too. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Stay tuned. We got more episodes coming later in the week.